President Trump considers a move that has brought together resistance from the left and the right. The stakes for U.S. involvement in a new Mideast war today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. Thanks for joining us on this Juneteenth, a holiday marking freedom for people enslaved in Texas. A proclamation announced in this state on this date 160 years ago, now celebrated across the U.S. The Texas Standard Sean Saldana takes us to the city where that event took place. Also, a new audit reveals widespread failures in how complaints about local jails are handled by the state agency in charge. A little later, we'll mark National Great Outdoors Month with some hot tips, part of our 10th birthday celebration here at the Standard. The big broadcast gets underway right after this. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 19th day of June, or as it's being marked today across the nation, Juneteenth. Across Texas, communities are marking this day with celebration, reflection, conversations about history, community, and the road still ahead. It was June 19, 1865, when Union troops arrived in Galveston and told enslaved black Texans they were free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Since then, Juneteenth has become a day to honor resilience, freedom, and the unfinished work of justice in the U.S. A little later in our broadcast, our own Sean Saldana will take us to Galveston. But among the top news stories today, the ongoing waiting game over whether the U.S. is going to officially enter a war between Israel and Iran. Fighting which, for Israel is already being seen as one of the biggest events for the region since the so-called Six-Day War, with Israel decapitating Iran's military and, by most published accounts, pushing the Islamic Republic to its weakest point since the 1979 revolution there. The world has been stunned by Israel's military success so far in this campaign, one that has sent Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei into hiding, while many of Iran's top military leaders and scores of scientists associated with Iran's nuclear program have been killed. But the initial objective wasn't regime change, it was Iran's nuclear ambitions, which the country claimed were peaceful, but which the International Atomic Energy Agency recently concluded was enriching uranium to levels used for making bombs. Much of that work being done at a secretive, highly fortified underground facility near the Iranian village of Fordo, a facility out of reach of Israel's ability to destroy even with its air dominance. And this has led to a moment of truth for Israel's staunchest ally, the U.S., one with enormous implications for global peace and security for years and years to come. Joining us now is Nahid Siamdoust, a professor of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Professor, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you so much for having me.
Seems to come down to this. Israel lacks the firepower to destroy the centerpiece of Iran's nuclear program. It won't get destroyed without the U.S. dropping bunker-busting bombs on Fordo. President Trump's reported to have approved a plan to do that, though he hasn't yet issued the order. But he's been so insistent on a diplomatic solution till now, campaigned on ending wars, not becoming part of them. What seems to have changed his mind here?
Well, I believe what changed is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's sort of foreclosed action of attacking Iran just 2 days short of the negotiations starting again past Sunday. And I think the initial success that he had in shaving off a whole layer of Iranian military leadership really convinced Trump to sort of change his mind.
Odd thing happening here in the U.S. with both Bernie's supporters on the left and the MAGA world on the right, apparently joining hands and opposing U.S. involvement, pushing back against President Trump. What are the political dimensions here as you see it?
Well, people have seen this horror show of regime change before. They've seen it in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, and none of those regime change projects have brought any kinds of benefits to the populations of those countries. And so, internally, you can see that the MAGA supporters and others on the left, of course, do not want America to be dragged into another costly war that will cost trillions of American dollars and American lives. And so I think Trump is really sort of weighing his options. It's very difficult to oppose the Israeli sort of push for bringing America in, not least because, they've gone 100% in. They're now aiming to target Iran's supreme leader. The Israeli president has said so much today that they're targeting him. So I think this is difficult for Trump right now, trying to weigh these different sides.
Yeah. Of course, there are a couple of different dimensions here. We've been talking about the political dimension, but there is a strategic dimension as well. What's the strategic case for U.S. military intervention if you were to what's the phrase, steelman it?
Sure. I mean, the strategic case they would argue is that they would end Iran's nuclear program once and for all. However, the question is that how the U.S. wants to comport itself in the world? Because the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, is the agency that is responsible for monitoring Iran. Iran was a signatory to the NPT. The IAEA has said that lately Iran has done some actions that have been not quite well monitored by them, or they haven't given them full access, but they haven't actually said that Iran is, close to making a bomb. That is something that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said. So, in all cases, negotiations could have taken us to a better place than a war whose results are absolutely unforeseeable and potentially extremely disastrous, not just for Iran but for the region at large.
Let's talk about the unforeseeable dimension here. Back in the days of Colin Powell at the Defense Department, there was this phrase used, the pottery barn principle. You break it, you bought it. In other words, if the Iranian government is toppled, could the U.S. and Israel wind up with a problem greater than the current Iranian regime? And that seems to be something that you're pointing out here. But what would take its place if indeed the Iranian regime falls? And many believe it may fall by its own weight at this point.
It really depends, what the Israelis and Mossad sort of have in store for Iran, to be honest. They're sort of driving this show. But at the end of the day, there's a very rich civil society and political society in Iran. And at this point, the best case scenario would be for the Supreme Leader and the Islamic Republic to step aside and to allow for elections without further bombing and damages in Iran. Because what we're not hearing in Western media is the high level of civilian casualties in Iran, the destruction. Iran is a very rich old country, and they're destroying some cultural heritage sites. They're destroying hospitals and communication centers. This is not just a war on Iran's military and political sites. It's really directly attacking Iranians, and this needs to stop.
In the few seconds we have left, do you think President Trump will give the green light, or won't he?
Unfortunately, I think he will. I think there can be political solutions that are to the benefit of Iranians, which is the Islamic Republic steps aside and their elections. But I think they're not going to budge. And I think it looks like Trump might enter the fray.
Nahid Siamdoust, a professor of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The U.S. Army says it's taking immediate action to implement President Trump's decision to restore the former names of 7 bases. The names were initially changed in 2023 after Congress banned base names with ties to the Confederacy. The Trump administration found a way to sidestep that law. Dan Katz of the American Homefront Project has reaction from Fort Cavazos, Texas, which is in the process of returning to its former name of Fort Hood.
While it would be illegal under federal law to name a military base once again after Confederate General John Bell Hood, it's not illegal to name it after a service member with the same last name. In this case, World War I Colonel Robert B. Hood.
They found some people with similar names, so that's how they worked around it.
That's Lawrence Romo, a member of the federal commission that recommended renaming Fort Hood to Fort Cavazos in 2022. That came after Congress passed a law saying military assets could no longer refer to the Confederacy or anyone who served in it. Romo says the Trump administration is now sidestepping that law by renaming the base for the World War I Hood.
There was no movement to rename the base. Nobody ever told me that they want to rename it back to Fort Hood. I can't think of a single person that's told me we should rename it back to Fort Hood.
The Fort Cavazos name honors Richard Cavazos, a Vietnam and Korean War veteran who once commanded the base. He was also the Army's first Latino 4-star general and a Medal of Honor recipient. Romo says the commission's work was based on merit and local community input. Cavazos is part of a storied Texas family with a history of military service. To them, the name change is an insult.
I think it's really a backhanded way to change the name from Cavazos to Hood for someone that didn't have the same level of achievements and bravery. And it's just so unpatriotic the way I see it.
That's Ramiro Cavazos, a cousin of the late Richard Cavazos. He says his family wasn't consulted in the process. 2 years after the Army held a celebration for them.
We had over 150 Cavazos family members there, many of them who have served our country. And to do this in this manner is just really very mean-spirited. But we'll continue to move forward and be proud Americans and hope for a better day.
The Pentagon did not respond to our request for an interview, but President Trump explained his decision during a recent speech at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which, along with Fort Benning, Georgia, was already renamed earlier this year.
We won a lot of battles out of those forts. It's no time to change. And I'm superstitious. You know, I like to keep it going, right? I'm very superstitious. We want to keep it going.
Rivka Maislish is a senior research analyst with the Southern Poverty Law Center. She says she wasn't surprised by the move and that it fits into a pattern.
Including military bases named after people who literally made war against the United States of America. You know, I always say, like, what other country has military bases named after people who made war against it? But there's a history there. It's a history of a propaganda campaign to erase the true history of the Civil War and establish white supremacy through other means.
Maislish says she doesn't want to denigrate the service of the people with the same last names as the Confederate generals, but she questions if the new base names really honor them.
And I think it's insulting to the names of the people who have no association with traitors or white supremacists, that now their name is being used to recall the memory of traitors and white supremacists.
The Army said in a statement that the name changes of the 7 bases will take effect immediately. I'm Dan Katz in San Antonio.
That story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration covering American military life and veterans. Wells Dunbar joins us now with a look at what Texans are talking about on this Juneteenth. Hello, Wells.
Howdy, David. Another setback for SpaceX's Starship program, that massive rocket exploding during routine testing late Wednesday night at the company's Starbase facility and now town in South Texas. Video shows the SpaceX craft erupting into flames around 11 o'clock while sitting on the test stand. No injuries reported. But it's the 4th Starship to fail this year alone. That rocket is central both to NASA's plan to return astronauts to the moon and Elon Musk's own far-fetched vision of reaching Mars. Another launch was reportedly planned for later this month, but that timeline may now be in question. We'll have more on this in the news roundup at the bottom of the hour, but folks are already chiming in online. On Blue Sky, Ann E. Lee writes that spaceships are not software in the favored workflows of tech companies. They're all centered in just do it and fix it later. South Texas deserves better than this. And somewhere in ATX writes in to say this Musk guy can't wait to unleash his robo-taxi vehicles in Austin neighborhoods. Interesting comments there both, to be sure, and I'll be back with more later in the program.
Far-fetched to go to Mars? Come on. I would love to hear what other listeners think about that. Reach out to us. Look for Texas Standard on your social media platform of choice. There's a whole lot more of the Texas Standard just ahead. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the beef-loving Texans at the Texas Beef Council, a community passionate about what they eat, where it comes from, and how it's prepared. Recipes and meal ideas at beeflovingtexans.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from UNT's online master's degree in Advanced Data Analytics program, preparing business professionals to shape the next generation of AI business solutions. More at online.unt.edu/data analytics.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. In North Texas earlier this week, police seized more than 75,000 pounds of THC products and $7 million after raiding 3 wholesale warehouses and their owners' private residences. This according to CBS News Texas. Allen police, along with help from the DEA, had been investigating sales of THC products for about a year, first raiding local smoke shops back in August after finding what they deemed illegal products on their shelves. However, the businesses raided this week told CBS News through their attorneys that their products are in compliance with the law, calling the raids an example of continued harassment. The move to target the THC wholesale warehouses comes after the Texas Senate and House passed a bill to ban THC products in the state. The governor has yet to sign it. He doesn't have to sign the bill for it to go into law, but has until June 22nd to veto it. Hemp advocates and local business owners have garnered 150,000 signatures urging the governor to veto the bill. It's a story we're following here at The Standard. And you are listening to the Texas Standard. 160 years ago today, Union General Gordon Granger delivered an announcement in Galveston that changed American history. The people are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free, it began. Granger's News officially freed around 250,000 people who were still enslaved in Texas after the Civil War. The day commemorating this event is known as Juneteenth. It was made a national holiday in 2021, and since then, the city of Galveston has started a program where it hands out grants to organizations celebrating it. Today, the Texas Standard's Sean Saldana takes us to the city where it all started.
Right now, I am backstage at an opera house in Galveston talking with Diana Frazier about a sacred group ritual.
We eat at the snack table to get ready for the concert.
Frazier is a cellist with the Galveston Symphony Orchestra, which is about to put on its final show of the season.
We're about to play the Juneteenth celebration concert, and we're looking forward to playing lots of jazz, lots of ragtime. It's going to be a pretty cool concert.
For the past few years, the Galveston Symphony has celebrated Juneteenth with a concert, and this year's event began with what is sometimes referred to as the Black National Anthem. The song you are hearing now is called Lift Every Voice and Sing, and it originally started as a hymn written by NAACP leader James Weldon Johnson. It debuted in 1900, served as a rallying cry during the Civil Rights era, and today it's often performed as a way of acknowledging the resilience of Black Americans. This is the third annual Juneteenth concert, and to understand how this new tradition started, I sat down with one of the show's organizers.
There's so much history and cultural significance on this tiny island that's really important to our national history.
Christina LeBlanc is executive director of the Galveston Symphony, and she explained to me that this event was only possible with money given to them by the city of Galveston.
We received a $20,000 grant this year, which is amazing. We were incredibly grateful to them, and it's allowed us to be able to advertise, throughout the state.
In the past few years, Galveston has used money from its hotel occupancy tax to give out nearly $500,000 to various organizations as a way of celebrating Black history and driving tourism to the island. This money has been used to fund dances, poetry sessions, stage plays, and orchestra concerts.
I don't have much else that I know how to share, and that's how I feel with this orchestra. Even if it means staying up late some nights, it's worth it because the people of Galveston are worth it.
All the pieces performed for this event were written by Black composers, like this song, which is called Galveston Survives. It was composed by a woman named Isola Collins, whose family had lived in Galveston since 1865.
My great-great-grandparents were enslaved right across Galveston Bay and Bolivar, and they came here when they were emancipated for a better life and made their home here.
June Collins Pulliam is the daughter of Isola Collins, and she explained that her mother composed this song not just to capture the struggle for equality, but also the resilience of Galveston, which in 1900 was leveled by a hurricane that killed more than 6,000 people.
So much of what her piece of music reflects is Galveston overcoming. So it was, in her words, a reflection of those types of things that Galveston has dealt with and continue to survive and, as much as possible, thrive through.
Isola Collins also founded an organization called the Galveston Heritage Chorale, a group that sings and preserves African American spirituals. On the day of the concert, they performed alongside the Galveston Symphony.
Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning.
These are songs of joy, songs of sorrow, because the enslaved people could not express themselves through other forms of communication.
Melissa Deitman is a Galveston native, a high school choir director, and the conductor of the Heritage Chorale. And when I sat down to interview her, she told me about her favorite song they performed that day. It's called I Wanna Die Easy.
I absolutely love this piece. it is a testament of when you get to that point in your life and God calls you home.
Would you be able to sing part of this right now, or is this too much pressure with the mic in front of you?
I can sing a little bit of it.
Yeah, go for it.
I wanna die easy when I die. I wanna die easy.
Juneteenth is a holiday that will forever be tied to the institution of slavery. But the point of this concert was not to fixate on the historical struggles of Black people. The goal was to highlight their ongoing contributions to American culture, which is why the final song of the day was written just a few years ago. This song is called Yola Jazz Suite, and it was composed by a man named Charlie Harrison, who has served as director of the UCLA Jazz Orchestra since 2004. At the end of the concert, it played well for the audience. There is not one exact day that marks the end of slavery in America. The Emancipation Proclamation went into effect on January 1st, the Civil War ended on April 9th, and the constitutional amendment abolishing slavery was adopted on December 6th. But none of those dates are a federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery. Juneteenth is. It started on the Texas Gulf Coast, but has since been adopted by the entire nation. From Galveston, I'm Sean Saldana for the Texas Standard.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT Austin's LBJ School of Public Affairs, announcing its new Master of National Security degree. Applications for 2026 open on September 1st. Information at lbj.utexas.edu/national security. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Alexandra Hart. A SpaceX rocket blew up on the launch pad last night in South Texas. A fireball lit up the night sky and shook houses around the facility in the newly named city of Starbase around 11 o'clock. The company says it was conducting tests on the launch pad when a rocket experienced a, quote, major anomaly. No injuries were reported, and it's not clear what this means for already planned missions. Juneteenth celebrations in Galveston will include the person who made it a federal holiday. Houston Public Media's Rob Salinas reports on details behind former President Joe Biden's visit to Reedy Chapel.
It started with an idea.
We had a thought that it's the 160th anniversary of Juneteenth, and who better to come and to be in attendance than the person that signed Juneteenth into a federal holiday.
Reverend Lynette Patterson is the pastor at Reedy Chapel in Galveston. She says the church sent a letter inviting former President Joe Biden to visit.
After we heard about his health concern, we were a little doubtful that he might come.
Biden was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer in May. Months went by and no word on whether he would attend until a recent phone call.
And I couldn't believe that it was actually his office calling.
Evening events include an Emancipation March followed by a church service. I'm Rob Salinas in Houston.
West Texas farmers got a visit from Governor Greg Abbott yesterday. He was in Lubbock to sign legislation investing in the state's water infrastructure. KTTZ's Brad Burt reports the pair of bills will put $20 billion into the Texas Water Fund over the next 2 decades.
Texas leaders are calling it, quote, the largest generational investment ever in the state's water. In the Lubbock area, many are concerned about how a steadily decreasing groundwater supply could affect the growing region's agriculture industry. When signing Senate Bill 7, Abbott said it's designed to develop new sources of water and reinforce old infrastructure.
We have an across-the-board urgency to make sure that we address the water issues.
The other bill, House Joint Resolution 7, would dedicate a portion of sales tax to the Texas Water Fund with a constitutional amendment that Texas voters will decide on in November. I'm Brad Burt in Lubbock.
A coin toss will decide who gets a city council seat in the Houston area. A runoff election in Pasadena between incumbent Bianca Valerio and Bruce Lehman tied, with both candidates receiving 272 votes. The two sides agreed to flip a coin on June 30th to decide on a winner. I'm Alexandra Hart from the Texas Newsroom.
You're listening to statewide news from public radio stations across Texas. This coverage is only possible because of support from listeners like you. You can help sustain and grow Texas news coverage by donating to your local public radio station today.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. We're exploring some of our favorite outdoor stories from the past 10 years as we mark a decade on the air. When newly hired meteorologists get to San Antonio, the first thing they have to learn is that the heavy showers they see forming on radar northeast of the city every summer evening have nothing to do with rain. TPR's Jack Morgan explains.
That's because radar isn't picking up rainfall, it's picking up bats taking flight. There are so many that if you're close by, you can even hear them.
We call it a bat NATO. That's so intense.
Fran Hutchins is director of Bat Conservation International.
We're sitting here at Bracken Cave Preserve, the home to the largest colony of bats in the world.
Just about 5 miles northeast of the city limits, Bracken Cave is an eye-shaped hole in the ground that's about 650 feet wide and 117 feet deep. It would be a lot deeper if it weren't for the bat guano.
And that guano has accumulated over thousands of years to where it's almost 100 feet deep.
How many bats does it take to generate 100 feet of guano or to impersonate a thunderstorm? Hutchins says they've done the research, and the numbers are staggering.
We have mommy and baby bats in the cave. We started having babies about 10 days ago. So our population went from 8 to 10 million pregnant females up to around 20 million mommies and babies.
The men roost elsewhere, like under Austin's Congress Avenue Bridge or San Antonio's I-35 downtown. Hutchins thinks vampire movies pretty well tainted Americans' views on bats.
I am Dracula.
Dracula. The very mention of the name brings to mind things so evil, so fantastic, so degrading.
He thinks we need to hit the reset button to understand what the 1,400 species of bats do.
Our fruit bats are important for seed dispersal. We've got pollinating bats, which are basically the nighttime version of honeybees. So there's over 500 species of plants worldwide that bats are responsible for pollinating. And one that a lot of us are familiar with is agave. It's where we get tequila mezcal, so that's important.
There's even one bat whose favorite treat is scorpions.
They can hear a scorpion run across the ground, and they just fly over and just jump on top of it and start eating it.
The main thing done by these tens of millions of Mexican free-tail bats each night, dining. They eat their body weight in bugs.
We're going to fly 60 miles from here and up to 10,000 feet in altitude, depending on where those large insect swarms are. They're going to eat their body weight in bugs, which is over 150 tons of bugs tonight. And they're going to come back, nurse their young, and do this all over again tomorrow.
That 100 feet deep of guano at the cave bottom used to be a harvestable commodity in centuries past.
The Maubach family protected this cave for hundreds of years, mining the guano because it's a great fertilizer, and also it's used in gunpowder production. It's really high in nitrate, so during the Civil War, they used the guano to make gunpowder.
Christy Miner is project coordinator at Bracken.
The preserve is 1,500 acres, so we do a lot of other things. We do, for example, tree surveys where we walk designated areas of the preserve and tag all of our old growth trees to kind of inventory them.
Miner says not all visitors start out as bat fans.
I find it really exciting when people show up and say, oh, my friend dragged me here and blah, blah, blah. And then the bats come out and they're like, okay, I get it.
And really, Miner says that experience of watching the bat NATO arc up and out of the cave and turn towards the south is incredible.
You don't want to protect something that you don't know anything about or that you're not inspired by. So I think it's a really good experience for people to have.
Fran Hutchins.
That's one of the cool things about having guests out here, especially the kids. When you got a 9-year-old, they put their phone down and they're watching this amazing spectacle of nature. The tornado of bats is 20 feet away. You can feel the wind from the vortex And the sound of wing beats is like rain.
In a world of computer screens and AI augmented realities, watching 10 million bats emerge from the cave, it's about as real as it gets.
You have a 9-year-old turn to their parents and say, hey, this is cool. You've accomplished something.
What goes up must come down, and the same goes for the bats. And the return is the most dangerous time for the bats.
Around 5 in the morning, the bats start returning. We see the reverse batnado. Just a little before 6 a.m., we get first light. And that's when the hawks show up for breakfast. And spiraling back in takes too long. So the bats change their behavior, and it literally rains bats because they're diving in at over 30 miles an hour to get into the cave as quickly as possible so the hawks don't eat them for breakfast.
The hawks are there sometimes in the evenings, too. We saw one fetch his dinner from the batnado leaving the cave.
People have lived in San Antonio all their lives and don't realize we have this amazing natural wonder here.
The Bracken Cave Batnado is available for public viewing most days. You can find out how to go at batcon.org. I'm Jack Morgan in the Hill Country at Bracken Cave.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. As you may have heard, the Standard's been on the air for 10 years now, and we're doing something a little special all year long. Each month, we're highlighting a top 10 list from our previous coverage. And since June is National Great Outdoors Month, well, we tied this month's list to stories about the outdoors. Those enthusiasts in Texas may soon have a new park to explore. Earlier this year, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department finalized the purchase of a 2,000-plus acre tract of land in Central Texas with the aim of making it a new state park. The parcel of land is in Burnett County, adjacent to the Colorado River next to the existing Colorado Bend State Park. Back in January, we spoke with Todd McClanahan, Chief of Programs for Texas State Parks. I started by asking him about the buzz the announcement created online and why this parcel of land is so exciting.
Yeah, David, this is going to be an exciting addition to our Texas State Park system. It is a quintessential hill country state park that's just got some incredible views. Obviously, it's got about 2 miles of Colorado River access that'll provide our visitors with activities such as fishing and hiking and camping. So we're really excited with this addition.
How did this deal come about in the first place? How'd you spot this land?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of partners, and then we also look at properties that are openly on the market. We procure properties from willing sellers, and so we look around some of these areas that are within the Golden Triangle or in the Valley to try to make it as accessible as possible for most Texans.
You talking about the Golden Triangle out in Beaumont area and all that? Or are you thinking about the cities that so many people are, trying to get to parks from?
Yeah, no. When I mention the Golden Triangle, or we call it the Texas Triangle, that Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, Houston area. Yeah, that's what we're looking at.
And I guess what we've been seeing a lot too is folks from those cities looking for a weekend getaway. It's hard to find a camping spot quite often. You go on that Texas Parks website trying to find something.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why it's really critical, David, for us to, the citizens of Texas, voted with tremendous support passing the Centennial Parks Fund, which has given us the ability to add more state parks to our inventory to help with that and provide more opportunities for folks to get out and experience their state parks.
Let me ask you an ugly question. How much did it cost to get this plot of land?
This piece of property, the acquisition price was $35 million.
I would imagine that price tag's been going up, especially as the value of property in Texas has been rising generally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the voters have trusted us to go out and make wise and and good purchases, for the citizens. And we're just really blessed that we've been provided the funding to be able to go and do this and add more experiences for our folks in Texas.
So give us a sense of how this park will be different from Colorado Bend State Park, which, what is it, like kind of across the street, catty corner to it, something like that?
Yeah, it's going to be directly across the Colorado River from Colorado Bend State Park. And so I think the differences, David, is going to be the terrain is similar. However, this piece of property has got a really unique post oak woodland, a mature post oak woodland that is not really seen, and certainly not in Colorado Bend. But this piece of property will likely have more developed camping than what Colorado Bend offers currently.
Interesting. How do y'all come up with how you use these properties?
Yeah, so we've got a team of park planners, but also an important piece is public input. And as we're going through and developing a public use plan, we will be having public meetings to gather that input and feedback from locals and from constituents as well, to let us know what do you want to see in your new state parks.
All right. Well, that's one big element before you can open the gates, I guess, here. But do you have a timeline on that? Are you thinking this will take a year to get through that process of getting feedback and public comment, or does it take longer typically? And then I guess you got to set up the property for those to come and camp and enjoy the park.
Yeah, absolutely. So our goal is to get folks in as soon as practical. And initially, probably within 12 to 18 months, we'll be offering limited day use. And that will probably be through guided hikes or public hunting next hunting season. And this will be happening while the planning process is taking place for the full development of the park, which could take anywhere from 2 to 4 years.
You started to talk a little bit more about the big picture for the Texas park system, how you're looking in that triangle of Texas's biggest cities in particular, looking down in the valley. How many more parks are we looking at over the course of what period? What does that process look like right now?
Well, David, so it really depends. We've got, we just closed on a piece of property adjacent to Enchanted Rock State Natural Area. And so we've got several others that are in the works right now that are under due diligence or under review. So with the Centennial Parks Fund, that provides funding for the acquisition and development using the interest from that account that was set up. And so we've got a plan in place. And so we have to look at what's available on the market right now. And then as we go through, then we have to also use those development funds the same. And so we've got to let that balance pick back up again for the interest that then allows us to go and pursue additional properties.
Do you have a name for this new park?
Not yet. We're in the works with that. We just closed on it just a couple of weeks ago. And so we look forward to releasing that soon.
One final thing before we let you go. You mentioned public comment. How can folks get involved in that process?
Yeah, so when that time comes, there will be probably local media releases. It will likely be on our website as well. So we'll have plenty of opportunities to get that word out so that the general public can make comment and hopefully attend those meetings in person to be able to provide their feedback.
Todd McClanahan is Chief of Programs for Texas State Parks. Todd, thanks so much for the update. Congratulations on the acquisition. Looking forward to checking it out.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
Again, we should note that conversation was recorded earlier this year in January, but it is part of our June Top 10 list here at The Standard. You know, all year long we're highlighting a themed list taken from our 10 years on the air in Texas. This month's theme is the great outdoors. We're also celebrating our 10th birthday by taking the show on the road. We've already had events in Austin and El Paso so far, and on July 1st we'll be broadcasting live from the Mayborn Museum on the Baylor campus in Waco. That's in collaboration with KWBU. You can find more information about that broadcast and other events we have planned throughout the year by visiting us online, texasstandard.org/birthday. Let's check Texas Standard Time here real fast. Coming up on 50 minutes past the hour. Coming up, how Texas jails are or are not following up on prisoner complaints. We'll have details from a new audit. That, talk of Texas, and more as the Standard continues.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Galveston Historical Foundation, celebrating Juneteenth. As Juneteenth's birthplace, visitors can explore exhibits, tours, and events honoring the legacy of freedom all month long. More at galvestonhistory.org/Juneteenth 2025.
Hey, what's cooking? Make sure to join us as we check in with Texas's top taco journalists to hear about the latest innovation stories and the people behind many a Texan's favorite go-to. It's Mondo Rayo with the Tacos of Texas. Next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Tacos of Texas comes from H-E-B.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The state agency in charge of overseeing local jails in Texas is under scrutiny after a new audit revealed widespread failures in how it handles prisoner complaints and jail inspections. The Texas Newsroom's Lucio Vasquez is here in the studio with me to help break down the findings. Lucio, welcome.
Hello.
What did the state audit reveal about how Texas jails are being overseen?
Yeah, well, it basically revealed that the Texas Commission on Jail Standards dropped the ball in several big ways. Like you just mentioned, it mishandled complaints, it skipped required inspections in some counties across the state, and relied on a faulty system to decide which jails needed extra oversight. And so some of these problems were labeled, quote, high risk and could have potentially affected prisoner safety across the state's nearly 250 jails.
I mean, some of these numbers are pretty shocking. I mean, how badly were prisoner complaints mishandled?
Yeah, I'd say they were pretty bad. The commission got nearly 10,000 complaints during the audit period, but in some cases, no investigator was ever even assigned. In fact, 95% of those complaints reviewed didn't have severity level marked. That's what tells staff how quickly they need to act after the report comes in. In a lot of cases, there's also no sign that they even contacted the jail after the complaint came in. So some complaints sat untouched for over 2 years.
I also mentioned there were problems with how jails were inspected. What did the audit find there?
Yeah, well, 5 counties, including Bexar and Travis and the Austin area, missed some required inspections. The commission's scheduling tool also miscalculated risk scores for over 75% of the jails that were reviewed, and that means at least 10 of these jails likely didn't get the oversight that they needed.
And this also looked into prisoner deaths. What did they find there?
Yeah, so all of this, of course, will impact prisoner safety and then could likely increase the number of people who die behind bars. So as for in-custody deaths, the jails across the state reported nearly 300 people dying during the audit window. In 60 of the cases reviewed by auditors, the commission was notified on time and assigned an outside agency to investigate. So that was good, as required. But by early this year, only half of those investigations were complete, and 3 had been pending for more than 2 years.
So, what did the state agencies say? Are they understaffed? Did they have a reason for why they fell so behind on the standards they're supposed to meet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did, at least on paper, respond to the findings. They essentially just agreed with the findings and said that they would be making changes by August. When it comes to specifically in-custody deaths, the agency, the commission, they say that they can't force deadlines onto local investigators. Basically, when someone dies behind bars, a local outside law enforcement agency will investigate the death. But again, the commission says that they can't enforce any deadlines, so those investigations could potentially linger.
I understand you've also been hearing from advocates about this. What have they said?
They've been sounding the alarm for years now. They say that there have been some deficiencies in how jails are being overseen in the state, and they basically say that these findings have validated their screaming into the void for a while.
So was this part of a routine audit, and are there consequences that the commission faces at all?
That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure just the routine number of audits, but I do know that these audits do happen over a set number of years. As far as consequences, there have been recommendations, and the commission says that they're going to be taking these recommendations and implementing them again by August. But we'll have to see if, these recommendations are sufficient moving forward.
Yeah, and this inspection was over a 2-year period. They've said this August deadline is something that they've set for themselves. But when might we know whether changes they make in August are really, addressing the problems found in the audit?
That's also another good question. And it might take another audit to decide whether or not these recommendations were actually followed through with.
Lucio Vasquez is the breaking news reporter for the Texas Newsroom. You can read more about this story at texasstandard.org. Lucio, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard.
As promised, Wells Dunbar, our social media editor, is back. Wells, what are you seeing?
Howdy, David. Well, it is Juneteenth, June 19th here, and I love this post I'm seeing on the state subreddit, r/Texas, about it. The title, June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger arrived on the island of Galveston and issued General Order No. 3, which stated, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free," end quote. So lots of reactions on that, as you might imagine, here celebrating it in Texas. Love this comment as well from that thread on Reddit. Just wanted to point out that Juneteenth has been an official holiday in Texas since 1980. Progress is not a straight line. Sometimes there's a lot of back and forth. I grew up in desegregation in the early 70s and would have thought we'd make more progress than this in some ways, but here we are. It closes by saying, "I see the celebration of Juneteenth as significant progress. Let's continue to move forward and fight for every inch of progress we make." Also hearing from our friends and listeners about their plans for the holiday, Leah Keith says she has no real holiday plans, but instead some reflection. She writes that a lot of people are talking about this being a celebration of the end of slavery, but in my opinion, it's more than that. It's a celebration of progress, of elevated thinking, inclusion, diversity, and equity. It's especially poignant here in Texas, where the holiday began. So many people, yes, talking about that, and many celebrations planned across Texas cities as well. Of course, it is a state holiday and now a federal holiday. So, lots of people talking about that and celebrating the holiday, David.
I should also note kudos to Sean Saldana, who was reporting from Galveston a little earlier in the big broadcast. A very interesting story that he did there. And if you happen to be joining us late, I would encourage you to visit us online over at texasstandard.org and check it out for yourself.
Yeah, heck of a reporter. I love hearing anything from Sean. He's the best.
Absolutely.
Well, we were talking about this at the top of the program, the SpaceX Starship explosion on the launch pad. You caught something from me there, David. I called this trip to Mars a little far-fetched, and you were calling this Elon Musk plan to reach the red planet.
It's just that I would like to think it's not so far-fetched.
Maybe.
But, when you have explosions on the launch pad, I get how.
Yeah.
But
four so far this year.
You know what they call this? They call this iterative testing, right? I mean,
yes.
You're trying to get it off the ground.
Trying to do it. And as we heard from a commenter earlier, that may be. There's definitely a difference in iteration when we're talking about debugging a piece of software versus exploding a rocket over the beach line. Yes. Edward Gray on Blue Sky says this thing is done. Howard Hughes had his spruce goose. Musk has his space goose. We'll never make it to the moon, much less Mars. So there's one reaction.
Space goose. Wells Dunbar continues to monitor the talk of Texas, and sometimes it is quite witty indeed. We're out of time for today's big broadcast. You can keep up with the news 24/7, texasstandard.org. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Ash, Shelley Brisbane, Kristen Cabrera, Alexandra Hart, Michael Marks, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonso is our digital producer. Leah Scarpelli is our director. Mr. Casey Cheek is our technical director. We're going to be back here tomorrow. We hope you can join us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas College Savings Plan, administered by the state of Texas. Families can save for tuition, room and board, books, and other qualified education expenses at eligible schools nationwide. Learn more at texascollegesavings.com. Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Waldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington Family, and the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation.